Hello, everyone. You are listening to She Leads with Carly, and in this show, we talk to the absolute best, brightest, and yes, badass leaders. I'm your host, Carly Malatsky. Hello, everyone. I am super excited to welcome our guest today, Margaret Wishingrad. Margaret is a mother of two, the daughter of immigrants, and the founder and CEO of Three Wishes cereal, a healthy while delicious cereal. Before founding Three Wishes, Margaret was chief of staff at BigEyedWish, an ad agency where she worked with Fortune 100 to seed round startup businesses. After welcoming her first son, Ellis, with her husband and co-founder Ian in 2017, Margaret realized there's a white space in the market for nutritional yet tasty cereal. She has grown Three Wishes from conception to a national brand, with retailers including Whole Foods, Sprouts, Erewhon, Target, Costco, and many more, in addition to a strong DTC arm. Margaret, it is such an honor to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So first, set the scene. Where are you in the world? Also walk through the background a bit. I love the background.
Yes. Okay. So I am in Westchester, New York, about a half hour north of Manhattan. And I like to call this my Great Wall of Cereal. So these are actually the original, like, first production boxes. And something in me was just like, I'm going to hold on to these. So these were the first three we ever made, the oldest packaging. And literally like the first unsweet and the first honey and the first cinnamon to come off of the line. So those hold a really special place in my heart. And then the rest is just in like consecutive order of flavors we've launched. So that's been a lot of fun. That's the Costco flavor behind me. Some really fun awards that we've had. The trademark for the brand, women owned. So just like a lot of fun little relics in the museum of Three Wishes.
That is incredible. And even, Margaret, I actually just want to start, when I read that intro, which it's so cool, right? Like even mentioning the brands that you're in right now with Target and Costco, which is pretty recent, and Erewhon and all of these incredibly well-known stores. How do you feel? What goes through your mind when you hear that?
It's not real. Every time someone's like introducing me, I'm like, that sounds like some really interesting person I'd love to get to know. And that's not me. No, it's still like, it's surreal every day. It's a constant pinch me. And as the brand's gotten bigger and I've gotten to meet people just like out in the street and I'm like, oh yeah, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I have this brand, a cereal brand. They're like, oh, which one? And it's Three Wishes. And they're like, oh my God, I love Three Wishes. And I'm like, really? Me? You love me? That's so sweet. No, so it's really cool. It's really fun. And I just feel really lucky to be able to do what I do. But it's Three Wishes is really a big labor of love. So
I love it. Okay, well,
it's awesome.
Well, obviously, we will get very into that. But first, I want you to take me to 5-year-old Margaret, 10-year-old Margaret. Who was she? Who were you like as a kid? Tell me about your childhood a bit.
She's the same as she is today, honestly. It's so funny. Like I've seen, when Facebook throws you back to like 10, 15 years ago and they're like things you wrote and I'm just like, I haven't changed. I'm really me and it's terrifying. And then you have children and you're like, oh my God, this one's being so stubborn. This one's being that. I'm like, oh my God, that's me too. But it's really funny. So I remember in like first grade or kindergarten, you had to like sketch, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you have to draw a picture. And mine, it's like so obnoxious. Mine was me in a power suit on Wall Street because I thought that's like what like a powerful woman would be, and a red Ferrari. Like, I don't know why that was my sketch in like the first grade. Everyone's like, doctor, like whatever. I'm like, no, she's in a power suit. She is standing next to a red Ferrari. And that was for some reason like my idea of where I'm going to be. I don't have a red Ferrari, but I do have a good power suit here and there occasionally. And it's funny, like looking back at what I thought then. But I don't know, there was something about me that always like wanted to just be like super womany but in business, and so it feels really full circle for me.
Wow, that is incredible. I love that story. And
I need to find this sketch. I need to frame it, honestly.
Yes. And where do you think that came from, right? Like that desire to be in a power suit. Like tell me a little bit. I know your parents are not from America. You weren't born in America. So tell me a little bit about that childhood journey.
Yeah, so I think for me, my dad would like watch MSNBC sometimes in the morning, or just like, I don't know, that was my idea of just like big city living and like powerful. And I think my parents always built me up to just like, you have to be proud of what you do, like really independent. And that's just who I am. Like I've always wanted to like work on something and hustle, and where everyone else in the summers would like play with their friends, I always wanted to have a job and I always wanted to work. Like I always wanted to work. It was such a big part of my identity for some reason. I don't, maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, but I really loved it. Like it just, and all these like random odd jobs. I was talking about this yesterday because one of the questions on a panel was, what was your first job? And I'm like, it feels like every job I had before this was a first job for me. Like it was a bunch of random things I did that taught me some life skill that I kind of found a way to weave into like where I am today. And this is the first time, I think in the longest time, that I felt like this is my career. It's like my life, my purpose, like what I do. And so, yeah, I think there's just like this work hard immigrant mentality. And then I think what's interesting is like my parents as immigrants, I think naturally you just want safety for your child. And for them, that was like, you have to go become a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, like some profession that's going to keep you secure. And so everything else almost like was categorized as like a hobby. So I always thought that's like where you're supposed to go. But back then, like high school before college, I really wanted to go to culinary school because I love to cook. But like in hindsight, I'm actually not a chef and I don't belong in a kitchen. So I'm glad my parents actually decided that I shouldn't do that and urged me to not. But very full circle, because like my love for food now comes in with the tie-in that I have of love for business, and to be able to do that together and work in food in a completely different way is also really, really fun and really full circle. So there are just so many little things I think along the journey where it still pinched me, and I would have never guessed that this would be my life. But I'm so happy that all of these little steps that I had along the way kind of led me here.
And throughout school, whether it's middle school, high school, did you enjoy being in the classroom, or were you getting all of your energy outside? Okay, so you were not like a student in the classroom.
No, I was not. I like went to school and did well in school but I didn't apply myself. I was like, why is someone reading a textbook to me? Like I could read a textbook if I wanted to learn this topic. Like why is someone teaching me something I don't want to learn? And so for me, it felt so forced. And if you didn't follow, and that's the other thing I think for me is in school, there's like only one way to learn it, only one way to do it, and you have to follow what everyone else is doing. And I was like, I hate this. Like, I want to learn it a different way, or I want to do it a different way. And maybe I don't want to learn this, and I should have the choice of like whatever I want to learn, I can learn. And so I think today, even like there could be a challenge and someone may approach it one way, and I usually go completely the other way. And I don't know, school just like wasn't my jam. Like I always wanted to work over going to school. There's just some kids are students for life, and that's just not me.
And what gave you the thrill of working? Was it making money and like earning something? Or was it like what was that exciting aspect to it?
I mean, I think I would be a liar if I was like money wasn't a part of it. I think that's always nice because it gives you independence where you're not like, oh mom, can I have $5 for ice cream? It was kind of like, oh, I don't need to ask for it. I could do it myself. So I think that part of it, but I think the bigger part was it was a sense of accomplishment because everything in a professional or work setting was a task. And I was like, I have to be the best at this, or I have to do this, or I have to figure this out because it's not something you've done before, right? Like everything when you're at that age is something really new. And I think for me, that challenge was just, I don't know, there's like a thrill. I loved it.
I think it's so funny to me because your competitiveness and just like breaking the status quo, like it just seeps out of you without, I don't know if you even know if you realize it, but like all of these stories, I'm just like, yep.
As I'm saying them, I'm like, ugh, I sound like just like some crazy competitive. And like, I didn't do athletics or like anything. And I feel like if I did, I'd be painfully competitive if I did, but and it's not that I'm competing with others is the other interesting thing. It's not like I'm like trying to just like elbow the competition out. I'm just kind of almost competing with myself and like proving something else that I that I couldn't do as well before. I'm just like, I got this. Like I need to win in that. So
yeah. And it sounds like that, right? Because if it was competitive to others, then it kind of manifests in the classroom because that's where everyone else is during that age. Right. But like for you to be like, you know what, not screw all of you guys, but like, I'm going to be separate from this and just do my own thing.
It was. It's interesting because if I look back at it in like a social setting, there were so many of these different like cliques and groups and people that were like big groups of friends and they would go out together. And I was never that girl. I was never like, I just didn't fit into any of these little groups or cliques. And I was kind of just like on my own, lone wolf, like does her own thing and forges her own path. And like, that was my thing. I don't know. It's just like a
I
very
love it.
interesting.
So you end up going to Hunter College. And
Mhm.
I remember either I heard this on another podcast or I read this, but again, you followed the exact same suit where college was kind of on the side and you were working the entire time. And so I
Mhm.
want to know, back to the whole sentiment of I had to be a doctor or a lawyer or, have that security. How did that play through? Because that kind of counteracts, putting
Yeah.
college on the side.
This is so funny. So when I was looking at choices, so growing up in Brooklyn, I I wasn't because I wasn't the type that's like, oh, I really want to go study whatever the specialty is and go to that fantastic college. Like that wasn't my world and where we came from. We kind of just went to like the local good college and that was it. And yeah, were there kids in my school that went to Princeton or Yale or Harvard? Sure. But that wasn't this like little immigrant circle. It was the kids that kind of knew how to apply and get to those places. And for me, I was kind of like, okay, I want to be in the city. So like that'll rule out. So it within Hunter's a part of CUNY, City Universities of New York. And so there's Brooklyn College, there's Baruch, there's Queens, there's all of like in each borough, there's like a college. And Hunter was like the best of them. And I was like, okay, I definitely don't want to be in Brooklyn. I want to get out of here. Like I want to be in the city. I want to be forced to like be there. I want to separate from this scene of like kids that grew up in Brooklyn. I think I want something else. And so that was like that narrowed it down to what schools do you want to do in Manhattan. And then I was like, you know what? I really love Bloomingdale's and Hunter's 7 blocks from Bloomingdale's. So Hunter it is. I swear. Like I must have been there every day during like my lunch break. And people at one point were like, do you work here? And I'm like, I might as well because I'm probably here. And I wasn't even, it's not like I was shopping. I was just perusing. Like there was something about consumer behavior that I just loved. So
Wow.
I would just like walk around. I don't know. There was something in me that just like loved it. It was electric. It was the Upper East Side. It was like my inner gossip girl was so happy. I don't know.
Yeah,
Who knows? But anyway,
totally.
so I ended up at Hunter and I started on a pre-med route because my parents kind of urged me to go in that direction. And I hated every single class. Hated. And so in that moment, I pivoted and I started taking one of my favorite classes, and it was just like an elective that fit into a bucket of electives was business law, and not the law of it all, but the business part was really interesting. And so I really enjoyed that class a lot. And ultimately, I wanted to work full time, but I needed to finish college to just say like and I finished college, and so I looked at the course load and was like, what can I take that allows me to work full time, take classes in the evening and like during the weekends and during the evenings, and will allow me to graduate as fast as possible.
Yeah.
And I looked at it and it was within like sociology, if you study women and gender studies, which was actually fascinating. And I ended up taking courses I loved.
Yeah.
But that for me was like, okay, this is my quickest way to just like say I'm done with this so I can get back to working all the time. And so that's what I did. And I got to work full time 9 to 5. And I would actually sometimes I would take a class during lunch. I would run because my office was 7 blocks from the school. So I would work, run, take a class, run back, work. Then I would go to classes and then I'd go home and I would do it all over again. And it was just,
Okay.
I don't know why. I just like
I
love
have
going to work.
All right, I have so many questions. I can go in so many different directions. But let's see. Even okay, when you walk through that schedule, right? Class, work, like it was busy. It sounds busy. Did you Were you social? Were you very independent and alone? Like how was that aspect of your life and were you
Good
craving it?
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I was still social. Now that I think about it, I'm like, where did I find the time to be social? And I think it's like, after a certain day, class would end at like 7:30, 8 o'clock. I'd meet up with a friend in the city for dinner and have dinner, like go out, whatever, and burn the midnight oil and somehow make it back to work the next day and not look disheveled, which is fascinating now that I think back at it because I could not do it at this age. But back then it worked. But yeah, I found ways to weave social life into
Yeah.
the whole madness somehow, and it worked for me. But yeah, I think it's like I am such a spontaneous and just like roll with the punches and like see what happens. And that's kind of what I did. I didn't like plan ahead a ton. I didn't commit to many things. I was kind of like, I'm like, let's do it. It was a lot of YOLO.
And when you made that pivot away from pre-med and you were like, you know what, I can't do this, I hate it. Was there backlash from your parents? Were there anyone saying like, Margaret, like, no, like keep your head on straight? Was there any of that? Or was there
Yeah.
just like your own, you
I
were the
think
own leader?
my parents know I'm so strong-willed that they could say whatever they're gonna want for me to do and say, and I'm just gonna be like, cool, gonna go do my own thing anyway.
Okay.
So they were just, it's not that they were like fully supporting that I pivoted, but they also weren't losing their minds over it. It was kind of like, all right, let her figure it out. She clearly like wants to get her hands dirty. She's clearly able and will figure it out. Um, and it's interesting, my dad, because I didn't enjoy school, was like, there are two paths. You can either work really hard with your head or you could work hard with your hands. And not like you don't have to do physical labor, but more of like, then you need to work. Like you can't just
Right.
say, oh, I don't like school, and then do nothing. Then figure it out and learn all of your life skills through experience. And that, I think, was the thing for me, where I was like, that's fine. I will go and I will work my butt off and figure out all these experiences, and that'll help me decide on what I want to do in life.
Wow, I love that. And walk me through a tiny bit about what was that work during college? What were you doing 9 to 5, aside from classes?
Yeah, so I worked at a really big like real estate company conglomerate. They had property management. They had like a ton of different things they did. So I kind of jumped around to a ton of those different jobs within there, and it was just fascinating. I think it like opened my eyes to Manhattan and real estate and how cool it was. And eventually from there, once I graduated, I decided to go and do like the real estate agent thing for a minute, which I didn't love because I didn't find joy in selling someone else's product like that. I don't know why that just didn't make me super happy.
Yeah.
Um, but the joy I have to like sell and share the story of my own product that I created is that I could not, like, you cannot replace that feeling. And so it's interesting, but yeah, I didn't love the real estate side, but it was fascinating and eye-opening. And I think a part of me also, the thing that's so interesting about Manhattan is like, you never know what kind of apartment door you're going to open and what's going to be behind that door and what you're going to see. And there was such a curiosity to just like see all of these cool apartments and be a part of the experience and the culture. And so that was really fun. But I couldn't be happier with where I ended up.
And am I wrong in thinking that it felt like you had a very yes attitude? Like you were open to things and you were saying
Oh,
yes and your curiosity was kind of leading the way. Is that true? That's what it sounds like?
yeah, insanely yes. Like just go with it, try it. Who cares? Fall down, figure it out.
I love
And
it.
yeah, I mean, there's like, I remember I was at dinner with a group of friends at someone's birthday, and they're like, "Hey guys, like let's go skydiving tomorrow." And I was like, "Cool, let's go skydiving tomorrow." Like, fine, all right, let's do it. And then I had friends that were like, "Hey, do you want to go to Miami tomorrow?" And I was like, "Yeah, let me call out of work. Let's do it. I don't think I have any exams this weekend in school. Yeah, let's do it. Fine." And so I would just like go and do it. And in those moments, like was living entirely super paycheck to paycheck. And there's actually another story on that one, but I was kind of like, you know what? The experience is so worth it. And I'm going to try to just be really frugal with whatever we do. But like, I want to do it, and let's just go
Wow.
for it. And I remember one morning because I decided to move out and live also, my apartment was actually midpoint between work and school. Like one
Perfect.
was, it was literally like 4 blocks and then 4 blocks. And so, um, I remember I was like, you know what? I'm kind of done commuting an hour in every direction. Even if it's going to be really hard to make ends meet, I just want to do it. I just want to put myself in this situation, and I know I'll figure it out. And I remember one morning waking up and I had a chase alert that I had like, under $200 in my checking account or whatever the amount was. And I went and got a second job that day and worked on every Wednesday. I would go and like help this other small property management company for a couple of hours to just make the extra money to be like, okay, this will be my going out money for whenever I want to go out next Friday or whatever it is. So yeah, I think it's just
I
like you have
love
to
it.
throw yourself into the deep end sometimes and know that you'll figure out how to swim.
But it's also not even, there are two different reactions to that, getting that from Chase of saying
Yeah.
like, oh shit, I will be in debt then, or you know what, I got to get a second job. Like that like tells a lot about you and very easily can see starting a company and Three Wishes cereal. So anyway, going from there, you graduate from Hunter. Walk me through that journey of like, okay, what's next? And when did that, founder seed start to play a role?
Yeah, I mean, I always loved entrepreneurs like that. I don't know, there's something about it that I love so much. And I always share, I'm like, now that I look back at it, I've only ever dated entrepreneurs. And I don't know why, but there's something about this like hunger and passion and fearlessness and just like desire to just like make something, prove something. And I think that's what I was always really attracted to. So I think I don't know, always craved that. And I always felt like I wasn't going to work for somebody. There was like something weird in me. I remember I was with a friend once and I was like, I just know one day I'm going to be successful. And she's like, Margaret, what does that mean? Like, who says that? What if something changes? I'm like, no, I know it. I know it because I'm going to will it and I'm going to do it and I'm going to figure it out. And for me, that was just like doing my own thing and controlling my own destiny and figuring it out. So it's not like when most people are like, all right, you graduate college and you enter the real world. I was never in college land. That was never a thing for me. I was never like, oh, frat parties. Like, that's not what city schools are. City schools are like, you go to school and then you leave and you go home. There was you don't make friends there. You don't become a part. There's no culture. It's just like it's right. a built steel building in the middle of Manhattan. You go to your class and you leave. And so my friends were kind of outside of that and older actually too, which is interesting. But, yeah, it wasn't like, all right, I'm ready for the real world. What are you going to do now? Like spread your wings and fly. I've been flying. I've been on my own thing before that anyway. So for me, I was like, all right, I'm done with this headache of school. Like I don't have to deal with school anymore, which is great. And not to say if anyone's listening that don't go to school, that's like not the message you take away, but it just wasn't the thing for me. I didn't love it. And that I think is the other thing is like, you don't necessarily have to go to school or take a class to feel like you can figure something out and learn. There's 1,000 other ways. And school's not the defining factor either. I think that's another little interesting point is especially in this founder orbit, everyone went to the best Ivies and has this incredible network that they were exposed to that they were able to fundraise money from. And that is not me. I'm always the girl in the room that's like, I went to the school that was close to Bloomingdale's. That is how I decided. And that is that on that. No, but I think for a minute, I did have some educational insecurity. And it's not because I doubted my intelligence. I think it's the pedigree was interesting to see like, hey, everyone has such fancy educations. And by the way, kudos to you because you went to an incredible school. And I'm sure that was really hard for you to get there. But I think for me, for a second, I was just like, I don't know, like, do I doubt myself? Because they all went to these super fancy colleges. And then you kind of all level out and you're all human. And I have some advantages on scrappiness that maybe they don't have in their fancy schools, but it was just, I don't know. I feel much better about it now as I've gotten older where I'm just like, that doesn't even matter. You can go to any school and you could not even go to you could skip college and still be extremely successful. And so for me, it's just putting in that work and just like staying really passionate about it. I think the passion is the biggest thing. And I talk about it with Ian a lot and just like other people. I'm just like, if you're passionate about, you could be the most passionate janitor and have the best janitorial business because that is what you love. Like there's no limit. And I think that for me was the biggest unlock in my life was just, I happen to do something I'm so incredibly passionate about.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. And on that point where you mentioned to your friend, I'm going to be successful. And this, not even during this time in your life, I want to know like Margaret throughout her life, what does that look like for you? Is it more of just maybe saying it out loud? Is it writing it down? Is it like what does goal setting or manifesting look like for you, if at all?
Yeah, it's not saying it out loud. It's not writing it down. It's not making a vision board. I'm kind of like, I just set it in my own head and it's like a challenge. Like I put myself up to something and I'm like, oh, I need to do this. And I think it's the same whether it's like, oh, I need to lose a pound and figure that out, or I need to do this. It's that same set of like, you got it, go. And like, it's a mental strength thing entirely.
I love that. So you ultimately found Three Wishes cereal. And before that, you actually worked for, I believe BigEyedWish is Ian's ad agency. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I guess even before then, how did you meet Ian? You obviously end up marrying him and founding a company. So he plays quite an important role in your journey in your life. So how did that happen?
Okay, so That's another thing we talk about all the time is like the biggest decision you'll ever make in your life is who you choose to marry and who you choose to have a family with. And we both feel insanely lucky that in this like world of billions of people, somehow our paths crossed, and we ended up where we are today. And Ian is truly like my best friend, and we are the same person in so many ways. And we don't even need to speak to each other. We can look at each other and we know like it's a weird relation. You see the two of us together. Anyone that meets us together is always like, you guys are insane on the same, like it's weird. So ultimately I get to work with my best friend, which is the best. But we were at a party in Soho on a Friday in the summer. And Ian, it was a friend who has a startup actually. And he was having an office party and they said, hey, there's going to be models, come to this party. I was neither model nor whatever else was promised at that party. And so Ian came to the party and I came there early, and I was waiting for my friend who invited me to this party. And I'm sitting at this table waiting for her, and Ian's sitting at this table just like eating across from me. And he starts sassing me and I start sassing him back, and we're both kind of just like going at it and talking, and it's really funny and we have really good banter. And he asked me for my number, and then I watched him walk around the room, talk to a ton of other girls, I'm sure plenty of numbers made it into his phone too. We never ended up speaking after that party. And then 6 months later, when I was in real estate, I was building out a Facebook group for the broker I was working with, and it pulled from my phone of people you may know. So I started adding all of these people, and Ian was like, hey, have we met? And I'm like, yeah, at that party 6 months ago. He's like, oh my God, I remember you. And fast forward, we went to get drinks and dinner a week later, and Ian was like, can I see you again tomorrow? And I was like, that is crazy and aggressive. And yeah, duh, absolutely. And it's that same, like, we were both like so gung-ho. Our second date, he asked me when my lease was up. And I was like, wow. Okay, next March. We ended up both breaking our leases literally 3 months later and moving in together. But we have seen each other every single day from our first date. And on month 10 of dating, got engaged. 8 months later, we got married. 9 months later, nearly to the day, we had our first kid.
When you know.
It was just snowballing. But I was in real estate, and Ian, once we were dating, his agency was growing, and he was like, do you mind helping me? And I was like, all right, cool. Like, I'll help you like a day or 2 a week. And then all of a sudden it just like snowballed, and we started to grow that together, and he started to win big clients, and I basically became his partner in the business. And we really loved building brands for other people. And I think we always wanted to do our own thing, but didn't really know what it was. And then when that cereal light bulb went off, it was kind of like, okay, I'm going to run it. I'm going to run with this. And this is going to be the thing I do. And Ian obviously helped me co-found it and is a big part of like decisions, but it's kind of my show. And it's a lot of fun. And so Ian still has the agency, and we have 3 wishes. And it's sometimes I'll dabble in some of his things where like I'll hear him talk about some ideas, or I'll like see a video that they're doing and I'm like, no, change that or move that. So like I can't help myself, and I still look at some of those things. And then obviously he's still involved in 3 wishes. So it's a lot of fun. We love it. We were talking about this yesterday. Our date nights, when we're just like the 2 of us at a dinner, we'll come up with names of brands, names of restaurants if we made it. Like that is what we love. I can imagine. We love to create. So we're sitting there, we're like, all right, if we made a company that only sold this, what would you name it? Like, and then we'll just come up with names. We're like, oh, that's a good one. So that's our like our
you guys fit perfectly.
Oh, it's sickening.
Completely.
Yeah, it's disgusting actually. But no, it's so funny because I think the thing that brings us thrill is creation and creativity. And then executing these things. And yeah, we can come up with 1,000 ideas and maybe do 1 or 2, but it's so fun. And that what we love to do on the actual brand side and how we grow the brand is we love to just sit there sometimes. Like we'll take a drive. The car is one of our like best things. Like we'll drive in the car together, and you'll just be on a road and you're not thinking about anything, and you just let your brain go, and we'll think of some of the best ideas while we're just driving together.
And these are also just ideas like outside of 3 wishes or Big-Eyed Wish. Like it's just random.
It could be 3 wishes. Sometimes it's Big-Eyed Wish. Sometimes it's 3 wishes. Sometimes it's just random ideas. Like one time we bought a car and had to pick it up from Michigan. And so we had to drive there with the car that we had that we sold to pick up a new car. And our entire, whatever, 10 plus hour drive there and back was just like ideating things the entire time. And people are like, don't you get tired of just talking to each other all the time for 20 hours straight? And I'm like, no, it was the best. We came up with so many good ideas. And it's
That's
just like we just build off each other, and we just bring very different ways that we view things, but they are really complementary. So it's an interesting dynamic. And that's where we feel super lucky. We're like, we found the other half of our weird piece of the puzzle. Like what? So it's really cool.
I love that. That's amazing. And you have your first son, Ellis, which obviously is the key tenet of, if you will, of, you know what, we are building a cereal brand.
Yeah,
so
he likes
walk
to remind
me through
himself
that.
of that too.
I'm sure.
Ellis loves to remind us. By the way, we were at a birthday party a couple weeks ago, and there was a face painter, and he got the number 3 painted on his face, and I'm like, what is that for? He's like, my company. I'm like, oh, my company, okay. It was really funny. So,
how does Jonah's your other son, right?
Yes.
And so how does Jonah know about this? Does he?
Yes. Jonah wears a 3 Wishes shirt to school like every day, and everyone knows we're the cereal parents. It's really funny. But yeah, Jonah's less of the brand story, but we'll let him rock with it. But Ellis, so Ellis was the inspo, and part of it was, you have a kid. You're like, okay, I spent all this time making this child, and here they are. And I started to make my own baby foods and like really considered what I was feeding him. And when that recommendation for pincer skills and cereal happened, it was like, oh, I'm absolutely not feeding him anything off the shelves. Like everything is trash. And part of me was shocked that it was the same cereals that I saw as a kid, because it feels like everything else had a modern take. And that was the moment where I really dug deep and was like, wow, this is a category that's been in historical decline for a while, and there's a big lack of innovation. And I think we deserve as consumers to eat something that we enjoy, because cereal is such an enjoyable and nostalgic, delicious, like bring you joy food. And I don't think that people need to sacrifice the taste and macros and ingredients to enjoy these things. And so that's when I was like, Ian, we should do a cereal. And he was as gung-ho as I am about everything. And we kind of just like, okay, let's do it. And we hired a food scientist and formulated a product, and then just kept working on it for 2 years. And then we ended up launching it. And someone yesterday was like, well, did you think about failing? I'm like, who thinks about failing? Who jumps into something and they're like, well, if it doesn't work out, like, you don't think about that. You just go. You tell yourself that there's nobody that's going to get in your way. You're going to figure it out, and you're going to do it. And if something along the way happens where you need to pivot and you need to figure something out, you'll deal with that and address it when it comes. It's similar to the waking up with the checking account. It was like, yeah, you can either sit there and panic about something, or you can just figure out how to solve it. And so Ian and I are both very solution, just like that's who we are. We're like, without starting to panic and figuring out like, what do we do? We're just like, all right, don't worry, put it behind you, let's go, and like figure it out. And we're super nimble, and we're able to pivot really quickly. And I think that's a big advantage. And I think it's a very important part of entrepreneurship, is not being caught up in the wave of like emotions and what the task at hand is, and just knowing how to change. And that's the same when people are like, well, what did you do? How did COVID change your business? I'm like, that was just another pivot, right? You're just like, okay, weird. You can't do things in store. How do you figure it out? And how do you communicate certain things to people? So it's a complete, when there's a will, there's a way.
Yep, totally. And okay, a couple thoughts. Even like you said, right? The cereal business was in decline. And not only that, outside of cereal, like we were going towards a healthy, Whole Foods, Sprouts, Erewhon, like all these retailers even were very much projecting like health and, gluten-free and all these different types of labels, if you will. And so I think, like you said, cereal was the one thing that didn't really catch on to that, which like the blank in the market, if you will. And in those early days, right now you casually say, had to find a food scientist and did that for 2 years, but that's different, right? That's a whole process in itself. Like, how did you know what food scientists and how that actually works? How ingrained were you in that whole process? And how challenging was it to actually get started?
In hindsight, nothing feels challenging. I think it's like you
Okay.
almost have founder amnesia. You're like, oh yeah, that was
Yeah.
like so easy. Like I talk about it now. I'm like, hey, just hire if it's you could do this. Like, but in the moment, you're like, okay, you kind of identify what your little like task is, right? For me, it was I want to make a cereal. Who do I know that makes healthy food? So you start to call all these founders and like, hey, how did you develop it? Oh, where'd you find your food scientist? Oh, okay. Then you call the food scientist, like, okay, you only do beverage. Cool. Do you know anyone that does something like cereal? Oh, no, you know someone that does XYZ product. Okay, let me see if they know. Do you mind connecting me? Get on another call. So you have like hundreds of phone calls, and eventually you end up in the right place. And someone's like, oh, I know a person. And then you have that call and you're like, okay, this is what I want to do. Can you help me do this? And I think a big part of it is that same passion that I have selling my product, I had for creating my product, right? And I think part of that excitement and part of it is also like getting the buy-in from someone else that may have a ton of projects on their plate and maybe they didn't want
Right.
to take you on as a client, convincing them. They're like, hey, I'm going to be the one that's going to solve this. Can you help me? And I think there's something about it that just like everyone's human, connect with people, create a relationship, and see where it goes over time. And so that's kind of what we did.
Yeah.
And found the food scientist, did that. Then the next step was finding the manufacturing facilities. And, cereal is interesting because it's such a high production and complicated thing to make that all the minimums to be able to make it are super high. It's like a really difficult entry point is the
Yeah.
manufacturing part, and convincing your co-man to take a chance on you and to maybe give an exception to make some a lower minimum one time because you really think that you're going to come back with a really big order if they give you the shot to make a smaller order the first time. And finding those people that'll take a chance and just be a great partner is a really big thing too. So it was just finding all of those things and making them work together. But yeah, in hindsight, it all felt now it all feels like, oh, it's so easy and so long ago. But in the moment, I remember I left our very first actual production where I got those boxes from, and it ended at it was 5 a.m, and I was solo because someone had to be with Ellis, and so Ian was back home with Ellis. I remember calling Ian. It was 5 a.m, and I'm like, "We finally did it. We're done. We did it." And he's like, "Margaret, we haven't even sold the first box. We haven't even started." And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, aren't we done? And so like in that moment, it was just like the biggest emotional thing. Like, oh my God, I finally cracked it. I unlocked how to make tasty and healthy cereal. And now it seems so easy. But back then it was like, whoa, I just climbed Mount Everest in my own head.
And that probably helps you now too. If like challenges come up, you're like, you know what? We'll get through it. We'll climb that hill. We'll climb that mountain.
I also think children and having kids help you delineate from, is this actually a problem or is this minutia? It's interesting. And Ellis in school learned in this last couple of weeks, they're helping kids, I guess, triage problems. And they're like, is this a glitch, a something, or a disaster? And it's like, is it something small or is it a disaster? There's something in the middle. But anyway, glitch was the lowest level issue. And I'm like, that's a really interesting way to think, is like kids help you figure out, okay, this is actually, there's more to life. This is like a small problem. Don't stress over it. And so that was one of my little things I learned as a mom. But we're like, when you're younger and you're just like on your own and you're single and you're solo, you're like, everything's a big deal. It doesn't become such a big deal when you have kids. But for me, identifying what's a glitch or whatever, or a disaster, that was like, I think that's a big thing for me, of like, okay, we got this, we'll solve it. Okay, a truck broke down, let me call this person, figure this out, or this happened. Like there's every day there's a fire drill, right? But if I let all of those fire drills get to me, I wouldn't be like, you'd be paralysis analysis here, right? But you don't let yourself get there.
I love that. And I feel like that framework could even be applied in like relationships, like a fight, in all different ways like that. Yeah, that's great. And speaking of, fires that you have to put out, another aspect of you that I've learned before even talking to you is this level of scrappiness. And there are 3 key stories that I would love for you to talk about, which is one, what happened when COVID happened and everyone couldn't go into stores And this was, I believe, like right at the start of Three Wishes in a way. And like people didn't really know about it or they hadn't used it yet.
It wasn't even 6 months in.
So yeah, walk through that.
We launched basically November, but October 25th of 19. So a couple months in was COVID. So that's a great point. By the way, it was glitch, bummer, or disaster.
Okay. Bummer. That's a good
which
one.
I like. It's like, it's a good one. Okay. So back to COVID. But yeah, this was like an example of, I think, just my approach, where so many people, their approach to growth is constant fundraising and funding and burning, and that's how they grow their brands, where I'm a little bit more scrappy. And so for us, we had this issue, right, where now we launched into stores because a big focus for us was how do we break through in brick and mortar. And you launch into stores and you used to be able to sample all the time, because a big part of healthy cereal is like, well, is it going to taste good or is it going to taste like cardboard? And people would try it and they're like, oh my God, this is actually delicious. I love it. I'll buy it. And so days that we would sample, it was literally Ian or myself or the both of us together.
Yeah.
We would sell so much cereal those days. And so that was a big and important thing for us. And so all of a sudden COVID rolls around and we're like, crap, we're getting into more stores. We're on shelves in certain stores. How do we get people to try it without spending all this money online? Like, how do we actually tell people? And so at that time was two things. It was a horrible news cycle. Everything was devastating, of like, you're watching the news and it's like, oh, there's a shortage here, or you can't get a COVID test, or then you can't get to a hospital. And it was like really devastating. And then the other part of it was this idea of COVID drive-through for COVID tests. And we have a U-shaped driveway, and Ian's mind is like a beautiful place. And he thinks of things in such creative, cool ways. And so one of the things was like, Margaret, what if we did a taste test in our driveway? Because everyone's doing drive-thrus. And it was a part of the pandemic where like people weren't meeting up with other people, but they were just like driving around aimlessly to just get out of the house, right? And so I was like, you know what? I'm like, that's a crazy idea and I hate it, Ian, but fine. I'm like, all right, I'll give it to you. So we took one of our pallets that we had from like a shipment of cereal that I kept in the house, and I took my kid's roll of paper from his like painting things and his little paintbrushes, and I wrote like drive-through sampling, and all this, and I was with a pair of gloves, tongs, a mask, the whole kit and caboodle, and I put little individual cups of cereal. And we live on like a pretty busy mainish road where we are, and so we just put the sign up, and then all of a sudden his car started to drive through, and Ian's like, I'm just going to capture this content and see what happens. And I was like, all right, fine. And I'm like standing there giving people with tongs these little things of cereal, and everyone's grabbing them. And so long story short, now we have all this great footage. And one, the sampling was great because people got to taste it, love it, and then go buy it. So that was obviously a fun little effective converting thing. But Ian took that footage, cut it together, and we sent it to our local paper to see like, okay, what happens? And they were like, one, in a time of such like a crappy news cycle, to be able to weave in, hey, look what the small business is doing to like, you know, stay relevant in their community, but also just like engage with people and have them taste their product. And like, how do you grow when the odds are kind of against you?
Yeah.
And that picked up. And all of a sudden it went from like our local thing to USA Today. And then all of a sudden Fox News, like national news, called us and was like, hey, can we do a segment where we interview you guys? And we're like, cool. So it was like a 2 to 3 minute segment when everyone was at home watching the news all the time. So all these eyeballs are there. And so we do this interview, and then I'm sitting down on my computer minutes later, and I'm just like, all of these orders are starting to flood in. And I'm like, we had the best sales day I think we probably ever had. And I'm just like, Ian, holy crap, I'm so sorry that I totally told you that idea was the dumbest thing I've ever heard 2 hours ago. God bless. So it was a great example of like, you know what? Go for it. Shoot your shot. See what happens. It could be a tree fell in the woods, or it could be something.
By this time, though, were you already, it seems like yes, but were you already online D2C brand, or like was COVID the impetus to do that?
No, so we kind of, when we launched online simultaneously. So we were on Amazon, and we had our website. But during COVID, so two things happened during COVID. If you bought on Amazon and you were an essential item, which food happens to be an essential item, you could get it within a day or two versus I don't know if you remember, but then if you ordered like birthday party supplies, you wouldn't get it for like a month. But if you ordered Band-Aids, you would. So we happened to be in that bucket. So that was great because we can get customers' orders really quickly. Well,
Yeah.
the other thing was no one was going to grocery stores. So if they found out about something that they could order online and have in a few days, that was really exciting. And then the last thing is on our website. We had another website before the one we have now, and it wasn't like the best path to purchase because our biggest focus wasn't like, hey, let's get you, convert you above the fold, blah, blah, blah. But within 6 weeks of basically COVID, we're like, all right, if people are going to be at home and shopping and there's a kind of no end in sight of what's happening right now with COVID, like let's revamp the entire website. So within 6 weeks, we redesigned the whole thing, relaunched a new website. That was a better shopping experience, and that was it. But I think that's a big part of like, instead of us going, all right, crap, it's COVID. All right, let's get sad and just sit on the couch. Like it was like all right, we got to figure out, people can't go to store to buy it. Well, how are we going to, one, bring awareness to the product tasting great? And then how do we also get people to go to our website and order it? And how do we make sure when they're there, it's the best experience? And so that was our quick, like, all right, let's pivot. Let's redo the website. Let's refocus here. Let's do that. And so, it was great.
That's incredible. And one more story in which I found so incredible, which is you guys decided to repackage. And from my understanding, you decided to repackage and you were like, how will we get that out there? How will people know that we repackaged this incredible new box, if you will, cereal box?
Rebrand, if you will.
Rebrand. Yeah. Okay, yes, rebrand. So yes, walk me through that process of, we decided to rebrand. What do we do to get it out there? Because I think this story is so,
it's a good one.
Like weird and out there and people don't think of, and it's just, again, that scrappiness and creativity.
Yeah. So basically, so we were rebranding because I'm like, you know what, let's make it just, we're going into conventional this year. I want to make sure the brand just like looks like we could clear up some communication. Let's like spice up some graphics, saturate some colors. Like we really wanted to make it tighter, and I love where the new packaging's at. And we're like, okay, but this isn't newsworthy. No one wants to just say, you're like, oh, you got new packaging, congrats. Like there's no story there. Yeah. And so we're like, okay, how do we kind of create some story and some excitement about new packaging? And we were talking about it. We're like, you know what? Our box got a facelift. And at this time, Ian and I both go down these rabbit holes on TikTok where it's like, hi, I'm Dr. blah, blah, blah. And I didn't perform work on Bella Hadid, but here you'll see she had her nose before and her nose after. And now she has lifted up, whatever it is. And so they do these like plastic surgery analysis TikTok things. Whatever. Plastic surgery talk. I don't know what the
of course, little rabbit holes on TikTok for sure.
I mean, the best. But anywho, so there's so many little things. And so we're like, okay, facelift. How funny would it be if we got the most influential plastic surgeons on TikTok, but also like these really big names in plastic surgery to review our redesign and our before and after as our facelift on TikTok. And where it's interesting is, one, it's a really low lift. It takes a minute or two to just send us a video. Two, it refreshes our content in a way that like changes it up and I think creates something new and different. And then three is, I think we have really good audiences that cross over, where if you care about, typically if like you're gonna care to spruce up how you physically look, you'll probably consider a little bit more what you're gonna eat as well. And so I think you have someone that's more healthy inclined. And so I think that's where Three Wishes is a really great fit. And on the other side, if you have someone that's probably willing to pay $1 more for cereal and cares about what they eat, maybe they'll care about this plastic surgeon too. So it was like, I'll give you some marketing and you give me some marketing. Right. And so we ended up reaching out to all of these doctors, but I watched Ian just pick up the phone, and he would call whoever the secretary of the front desk was at all these plastic surgery offices. And he's like, hey, whatever, Mary, crazy idea, but I want to pitch this to you. And so he would go and pitch it, and then it would have to climb its way up to the doctor. And Ian was just like working on collecting all these plastic surgeons. And we were so thrilled when all of them were excited to do it. And then, some of them we send the product to eat it and try, and they love it. And now they're like customers, and they like send us pictures of it. So it's really funny, but that was our way to create some news and excitement about a packaging rebrand that otherwise wouldn't be exciting. So it's finding the little bits in all of the little things we do to kind of bring human emotion and humor and cheekiness and excitement where it would probably not really matter otherwise.
Yeah, I find it so entertaining and just like, again, scrappy and creative and fun. And Margaret, I'd love to know, throughout this whole journey, have you ever felt so burnt out and you're just like, how do I keep going? And what does that look like? And this is too hard.
I had like one day. Well, I'm so I had this one day where I was like, actually, so two times. One time was when we were fundraising in the very beginning when we just launched. We were having so many calls with so many no's where I'm like,
Yeah.
Ian, I need a minute because this is actually soul sucking and I need to not speak to anyone for like 3 days. And that little like smelling salts and it was great. I got back on the horse, finished what I needed to do. And then another one was like maybe 6 months ago. It was just like days and days of just like shitty things to navigate. And I was just like, I need a minute. I don't want to talk about work this entire week. And usually I never refer to it as like work because it doesn't feel like work to me because I really genuinely love what I do. But those couple of days I was like, I need a minute. I just don't want to look at my phone. I don't want to talk about it. I just need to like take 2 seconds to just breathe. And I went and I bought a book and I like ate that book up in the weekend. And it was just the best little escape to let my brain just like rot and read a book and enjoy someone else's life story for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think it happens every so often. But not as much as I think most people probably think.
And like how you deal with that again is just like that separation, whether it's distracting yourself or like finding some avenue to escape for a bit and then come back with renewed energy in a way.
Yeah. And I think for me, the other thing is like, I'm really like also like artsy creative. So like doing little things with my hands or like fixing something around the house or just some like little project to take my mind off of it sometimes is really nice. But most of the time it's a reminder of just like, wow, I get to do this every day. Like, how cool am I? Like I get to create something that's in someone else's life. And that's just like the most incredible feeling. So 99.999% of the time, I'm just like, I'm living a dream. Who am I? How? This is insane. But yeah, there are some times where you're like,
well, you mentioned very early on in the episode how in the background you have, relics of your success or accomplishments or what, if you will. And I'd love to know, do you have advice for other founders, whether it's CPG companies or female founders to like get started and that fear, like getting over that fear of like, can I fucking do this? Like, this is hard. Do you have like, what are your thoughts or anything for that?
I mean, I've never let the fear even seep into my head. I think there are moments where you're just like, I don't want to do this right now, but it's never been like if you truly feel like you have something that's solving a real, like my biggest thing is sometimes I see things and I'm just like, what problem are you solving? What is this? That's a thing for me where I'm just like, this is why does this exist? But if you really feel like you found a why and a reason for something to change something else in the world, who's to stop you? I've seen sometimes I'm like, I've seen much dumber people become super successful. Why can't I do it? So no, but it's not even that. It's more of just like, if you really truly believe in whatever you're setting out to do, there's not really a single person that could stop you, including the people that I was on the phone with early days saying like, hey, I want to make a cereal. And some guy was like, that sounds like a nice hobby, honey. And I was like, really, guy? And now I'm like, haha, who's laughing? Go away. But it's just like, you gotta go. I mean, there were so many times that people told me that the macros I wanted to hit, their ingredients, or this is what, it's just like, you hear it 1,000 ways. And as long as you kind of follow your gut, because your gut is ultimately what is going to get you there anyway. As long as you follow it, I think is the biggest thing. And just also staying open-minded, and just hearing other people out on certain things is another lesson I learned, where I think I might've been a little bit more like stubborn and closed. I realized, and that was a big thing from learning from Ian, is just like being a little bit more fearless and not being afraid to listen to the feedback is helpful sometimes. So sometimes you don't know it all, but the moral of the story is go for it, girlfriend. Do it.
I love it. Okay,
what's the worst thing that can happen? You're gonna fall. Cool. Fine. You'll be okay.
Exactly. That's just a bummer. That's not a disaster.
That's just a bummer. It's a bummer. Exactly. It might not even be a bummer. It might just be a glitch. I don't know.
All right, Margaret, before I go on to the fun questions that I typically ask everyone, I do have to say that you are also the queen DIYer, if you will. And I may have talked to Ian before this, and he coined you the world's most competent person. So I want to know, what is your favorite DIY project that you've done? And what's your process? Is it YouTube videos? Like, how do you do it? I know you can make sushi, you paint your own nails, you fix toilets. Like, I can go on, it seems. But what is your favorite one?
I love all of them. No, for me, it's not even the actual like task of like, oh, I love painting. It's for me, it's like the challenge of like, oh, I could do it as good as a professional. Oh, I don't need to call a plumber. I'm gonna fix this toilet myself. Like, so
it's literally my mom. You sound like my mom. Like, it's a Jewish mother thing, I swear.
Oh, 100%. Like, I'm like, I'm not paying someone else to do something that I could do perfectly well. So I think that might be the thing. I don't know. I love them all, but yeah, it's funny because when Ian first said that you're the most competent person I know, the compliment, I was like, Ian, that's so offensive because when you're competent at something, you're just good, but you're not a master. You're not like incredible. You're not great. And now I'm like, you know what? The older I get, the more I realize competency is rare, and most people, or some people, are quite incompetent. So I will take the compliment.
It is a compliment for sure.
Take it. But yeah,
I love it.
I happen to be competent.
All right, Margaret. And by the way, those cereals behind you, you made those, right?
I saw them incredible. In TikTok, and that's it. So to answer your question, like, is it a YouTube video? What do I do? I can like visually look at something and just like figure it out. Like just remove the layers in my weird head. So this one I saw like crazy 15-second video. And I was like, all right, I could buy those. I could do this. I'm not paying for that. And literally did it. And
that's amazing.
Order some garbage off of Amazon. And next thing you know, you're making spackle. It was literally, okay, it was a bowl, a spoon, pool noodle, spackle, cereal, and resin. I'll leave it there.
Perfect. I know exactly what to do now. Exactly. All right, Margaret, what craft are you spending a lifetime honing?
That's a great question. I think for me is I love to almost like self-analyze and see where I could do better at things. And I think just like constantly like taking the temperature on my own, where am I and how do I get better, is like, that's the thing I'm honing, is constantly just like trying to become a master of whatever I'm working on. Mastery is my craft, I think.
I love that. And this may be similar, but I've heard it from others, but I want to hear from you. What is your superpower?
It might be a negotiation. I don't want to say it is, but it is, I think.
Can you give me a little more? Like what tips? Yeah, what do you have there?
Yes. Okay. So I feel like most people come at negotiation where it's just like aggressive and rough and just like, you're going to give me this price because I told you to. And like that couldn't be further from, like, my approach is soft, where it's just like, hey, this is like where I need to be in price. Like, let's work on it. It's way more collaborative. And I think it's interesting because every time someone's like, what's your superpower as a female-owned business or women-owned business? And mine is, I think I bring some softness to some male tactics and skills. And so I think in negotiation, I'm able to accomplish and get what I want, what I set out to do, but without pissing people off and without being harsh. And so I don't know, that's my little, it's my little,
it goes back to even that, again, like the power of people and relationships and like being friendly to anyone, you know, whether it's the janitor, whether it's another seat, like who cares? Doesn't matter. But yeah, I love that. All right, Margaret, I can probably talk to you for hours, but I do know you have a casual cereal brand, if you will, to run. So I will let you to it. But thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you.